Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Ryan, aka Ryantist the Scientist. I am on a mission to empower and inspire everyone with knowledge and fervor of the natural world. Maybe you have some questions, and that's great. I'm here to answer them for you. So let's do that together here on another episode of Ryantist the Scientist. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Ryantist the Scientist, where I answer all of your questions about all of the things related to the environment. If this is your first time listening to the show, feel free to go back one episode and listen to the very first episode of this show, and you'll be all caught up. Don't forget to subscribe to all of my social media platforms and to follow the show on all of the places that you can listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, etc., etc., etc. And leave comments, questions, concerns, rate the show, all that stuff really, really helps people find it and engage in it, and it's a really, really great way to support the show and what I'm trying to do and reach more people and start spreading some of the word about questions that people have about the environment. So we're going to dive right in and we're going to turn it over to a phone call that I got. A message was left, and it's regarding a subject that I know quite a bit about, and that is bees. So let's turn it over to our mystery caller.
Hi, Ryan. So the other day, I was driving, and I got stung by what I thought was a bee stinger implanted in my arm. But then I started to wonder, was it actually a bee? And is it true that this bee was going to die after losing its stinger in my arm? So I guess my question is, do all bees sting? Which bees sting? And do they die after they sting you?
This is a really fun bunch of questions for me because I enjoy bees. I know a bunch about them, and I've studied them, and I've done a lot of work to conserve different types of bees. And the first thing that I want to point out in this episode and this discussion about bees is the timing. So right now it is mid-November, and this message is from a little bit ago, towards the beginning of the month, maybe like a week or so ago. So it's early-ish November in a somewhat unusually warm November. So the reason that I bring that up is because, firstly, you were stung by an insect that you believe to be a bee, and I believe that it might not be a bee. And the reason that I say that is because I believe it is a yellow jacket. And the difference between bees and yellow jackets are wasps. And why that's important and why I think that it was a yellow jacket that stung you is because yellow jackets are omnivorous, but like at different periods of time, they do different things. They eat different things. So the adult yellow jackets are omnivorous. They'll eat meat, and they also do a little bit of the pollen situation. But their larvae actually exclusively eat meat. So they have like a meat thing going on in their dietary situation, unlike bees who are pollen eaters. So towards this time of the year, it's unusually warm, so there's still like a lot of insect activity going on. The amount of food that is available is starting to decrease, and yellow jackets are. You'll probably notice that yellow jackets are more prevalent around this time of year, towards like the end of the fall, because they are running out of food sources, and you being outside with perhaps food are a food source, so they will be more likely to approach you. Yellow jackets are at this time of year, food is becoming more scarce. You are a food source, and essentially, the adult yellow jackets are they're approaching the end of their life cycle. They're dying off, so they're a little bit more desperate and aggressive around this time of year. So that makes me one of the reasons that I suspect that it was a yellow jacket. The second reason that I suspect it was a yellow jacket is because bees tend to be much more docile. But I guess first, what we need to do now that we've opened up this conversation is to like talk about the differences. So, wasps in general are, how do I say this? So, bees and wasps are similar, but they're not the same. Bees are a subsect of wasps. They're a type of wasp, but they are different in that they have evolved from wasps to be entirely herbivorous. So once upon a time, a long, long time ago, there were wasps that were meat eaters. They started to incorporate some plant stuff, the nectar, sugars into their diets to keep them to keep their energy levels up, so that they can continue to hunt, to get food, to bring back to the nest, to feed to the young, to improve the likelihood that their colony would survive. Colony would survive, or that their offspring would survive, because not all insects, all of these animals operate in hives. They are individuals or hives in colonies. So the beginning of the habit or the behavior of eating nectar started this evolution. Some of them became benefited, rather. Some of them began to benefit more from the plant food source than the animal food source, and transitioned over to being entirely herbivorous. Basically, they were like, there's a lot of competition for meat, but there's not a lot of insects going for these flowers over here. So it became more beneficial for them to use angiosperms, flowering plants, their pollen and their nectar as a food source versus competition with everyone else for meat. And so that's where like the distinction first started. That's where the split happened, where one group evolved in the omnivorous direction and one group in the herbivorous direction. And so since we're talking about evolution, so that's where why I think it was the yellow jacket comes from. The next part is the stinging. Not all bees can sting you. Not all of them have this stinger. So in this conversation of evolution, what is a stinger? What is that? And what it is it is an evolution of an ovipositor. So all female wasps, Hymenoptera, like all these stinging insects, have ovipositors, so that they can lay their eggs in whatever cavities that they lay them in. So they can deposit the egg, ovipositor, where they want it to. And in a lot of these cases, there is a significant vulnerability of these insects to predators. So this ovipositor began to become a form of defense and also a means to catch prey. So it evolved into a stinger. So Hymenoptera are the types of insects that can sting, which includes ants, wasps, and bees, and some others. But those are the ones, bees and wasps. Think of it that way. And so they evolved this ability to sting. Many of them did, not all of them. And in this stinger situation, there's a lot of variability. So some of them can't do it at all. And then some of them have to be selective because of as you mentioned, like, do they lose their stinger? Do they die? The short answer is it depends. So some of them can't sting at all. Some of them can sting, but most of the insects that can sting are not likely to sting you because they reserve that for defending their nests. So that brings up another distinction so we have a bunch of these different differences. So there's herbivores and carnivores, bees and wasps. And then there's stinging capabilities, a variety of them. And then there's social structures. So there's in the United States, there's about 4,000 species of bees. In the whole world, there's about 20,000 species of bees. So there's lots of variability and lots of different ways going on. So social structures. Some species of bees, like the most common bee that I think everyone thinks of, is a honeybee. And those are naturalized in the United States. They're not from here. They were brought here. They are from Europe, Central Asia, and North Africa. That's where honeybees are from. And honeybees live in colonies. And there's a queen, and there's lots of different types of other bees, like the worker bees, the nurse bees, the drones, etc. And then some other types of bees, like bumblebees, some types of bumblebees have similar structures where there's like a queen and workers and drones and nurse bees. And then wasps have similar situations as well because they're all evolved from like the same larger group of insects. Ants too. So some of them have queens, workers, etc., drones. But some of them don't. In fact, most of them don't have any of that stuff. Most bees are solitary bees, so that they're just a single bee that lives its own life. And in that situation, all of the female bees are queen bees. So all of them are capable of reproduction, which is the sole function and purpose of a queen bee in colonies. So in the solitary bee world, the female bee does all of the stuff, all of the different castes jobs in a colony. In solitary bees, a female bee will do all of those jobs, and every male bee is a drone, and every female bee is all of the other kinds of bees, including a queen. So in relation to the stinging, only the female bees can sting because only they lay eggs. And because only they lay eggs, they developed the stingers. So 0 male bees can sting you, ever, at all. Same thing with wasps. but we're gonna just talk about bees now that we have a difference from wasps. So 0 male bees can sting you. So only female bees can sting, but not every honeybee is a queen bee, but they still have reproductive capabilities in their genetics. So like they don't become fertile because that involves the royal jelly and turning the bee into a queen bee, but all female bees have this biology to be able to have the structure that is the evolved ovipositor, that is the stinger. So that's why if you go up to a honeybee hive and irritate them, they all might be able to sting you. All the female bees might be able to sting you, which most of them are. Only male bees are drones. So stinging, the act of an insect, a bee stinging you, has to do with defending their nest. Whether it's a bunch of worker bees that are defending their nest or a female bee, solitary bee, defending her nest, her offspring. It's all a defense mechanism for reproduction, successful reproduction for their offspring, or maintaining the integrity of the colony in order for it to proceed. So, more likely than not, you will not get stung by a bee unless you are encroaching in a way on the nest that makes you appear to be a threat. And since you were in your car, I feel like you did not come off as a threat to the nest, which again makes me think it was a yellow jacket trying to find food before it starved. So, quick recap, because that was like a whole bunch of stuff kind of all over the place. So, bees evolved from wasps. A lot of bees, but not all bees, have the ability to sting. Many bees live in colonies, but most bees are solitary bees. Okay, so now the stinger itself and falling off and stinging you. So another layer to all of this is that while they're not likely to sting you unless you're causing a trouble for them, even then, the act of stinging in many cases, not all cases, does prove to be fatal. So like in the example of the honeybee, the stinger, because it's like a scissor kind of stinger, will break off and that bee will die. So basically, she needs to have a really, really good reason to think that you're a threat, because the act of her stinging you will result in her death. So that, like, again, like, inherently decreases the likelihood of you being stung. Like, they're not out there trying to sting, because if they do, the consequences are pretty great. And like a lot of other solitary bees have that same like feature. If they sting you, they've damaged their body, and then they can't survive. So it's, the likelihood is really, really small that they're actively going to sting you unless you pose a serious threat to their nesting site. We're going to dip back into wasps for a second, even though I said we weren't going to, but we are, because there are some wasps, like yellow jackets, that actually bite you. They have mandibles because they're carnivores, they have really strong mandibles that they can bite you with. And also, because they're carnivores, their stingers are not associated strictly with defense, it's an offensive thing too. So, like, because they're carnivores, they sting to release venom to paralyze their prey to bring back to the nest to feed their young alive, which is crazy. But because it's a hunting tool, they don't lose it. So they can continue to sting you over and over and over again and have strong enough mandibles that they can be biting you at the same time, which is like nightmare fuel. I recently had an encounter with a yellow jacket nest where I walked backwards into it or over the top of it rather, and easily 1,000 yellow jackets came out and stung me over and over and over and over and over again and bit me over and over and over again for I think like 40 minutes it took for me to like get away from the whole scenario. I wasn't being stung actively for 40 minutes. I was being stung for about 10 minutes, but they were following me because there's the pheromones that were being released so that they could smell where I was. And it was a whole big thing. But so to go back and kind of look at all of this stuff again. So it probably wasn't a bee. It was probably a wasp because of the time of year that it is. It was probably a yellow jacket, which looks a lot like your like stereotypical bee, quote unquote. Like a lot of bees are black and yellow and striped, like a honeybee, and a lot of like leafcutter bees and other solitary bees. But yellow jackets have that feature too. They're similar in size. They have similar like behaviors, but the time of year makes me think that it was probably a yellow jacket who is experiencing the end of its life cycle, and its aggression was higher and is capable of being higher. So it probably stung and or bit you, and that's more likely than not what I think happened. It could have been a bee. It could have been a honeybee, but I really don't think that it was. And second, can all bees sting? No. No male bees can sting. A lot of female bees are capable of stinging, but not all of them. And the ones that are capable of stinging are more often than not, very, very picky about using their stinger because of the consequence. They don't have that. They lost that trait of reusing the stinger because they don't use it for hunting. So when they do use it, it doesn't work out too well. So yeah, I think that pretty much, before I beat your question to death with the same answer over and over and over again, I'm pretty sure that covers all the components of your question, which were, do all bees sting? Which ones do? And do they die after they sting you? There's a lot more that I have to say about bees. But as far as your questions, before I get too confusing, as far as your questions are concerned, that's that's most likely what happened and why. So thank you again so much, dear mystery caller. I really, really appreciate people calling into the show and supporting it by participating in it. You can also support the show by following me on all of my social media platforms, and by following the show on all of the places that podcasts stream, Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Please feel free to rate the show and leave your comments. That helps its findability in the world of algorithm and internet mathematics, and helps new people find the show, and more questions can be asked and more answers can be given. So it really, really matters, and it helps a lot in supporting the show in that way. So thank you again so much for joining me and for listening to another episode of Ryantist the Scientist. It really means a lot that you are supporting the show, and until next time, thank you. If you have questions that you would like to ask, call into the show. That phone number is 347-470-4144. Again, 347-470-4144. And remember, there are no questions that are too big or too small. Music for the show was created by Julian Giamma. I want to say thank you so much for working with me to create such a fun song, and thank you everyone for listening and for supporting the show. See you all again next week.